Hello guys, welcome back to the FIGL extraction using BI content part 2. In this video, we'll handle the actual extraction part of it, whereas in the previous video, part 1, we had handled the installation of BI content. Let's quickly go over to our ECC system. Log in with your credentials. And go to transaction code RSA5. Now note that it is installation of data sources from business content. So basically these are SAP supplied data sources or standards data sources, in other words. Browse to your data source under SAP R3, FI, FIGL and 0FIGL10. You can see that it's general ledger, leading ledger balances. So we have got our data source, right? Select the data source, just click on it to select and click on activate data sources. You can see that the action is successfully completed here. Now in order to see whether it was properly installed, go to the transaction code RSA6, which is the post processing of data sources. Browse the hierarchy in the same path, using the same path, and you'll see that our data source has been activated and installed. Now that it is activated and installed, what you can do is have a look at it, or have a look at the details of the data source in the repository RSA2. Just type key in the data source name and hit display. There you go. You can see that the data source general ledger, leading ledger balances. You can see it's a transaction type of data source, and you can see that it supports AIED, which is after image extraction with the deletion flag. There you go. Now what typically this means is that the data source delta mode only supports after images, meaning the extractor only provides you with the after images. So you will have to handle the before and the reverse image, and the best way to do it would be using a standard DSO. And that is why when we installed business content, you could see that a DSO was by default picked up when we dragged the 0FIGL underscore C10 cube in the in data flow before. The DSO 0FIGL underscore O10 was automatically collected. So just close that, and since it is already activated, now we can go back to our BW system. Go back to your BW system and go to data sources. Follow the same hierarchy that you followed in the source system, that is SAP R3, financial accounting, FIGL. Now you can see that the data source is not yet available in the BW system because we have just activated it. Now in case somebody else has activated it, it might be available to you, but it is always a good idea to replicate metadata anyways. So right click on the application component, the innermost application component, and click replicate metadata. There you go. That's your data source that's replicated into the source into the BW system from the source system. Now you can see that there is a white dot just beside it, which denotes that it's a 3.x data source. Now we would want to migrate it to 7.0 so that we can use it in a 7.0 data flow. That is, you could create if you want to create transformations on it instead of transfer rules and update rules. So right click on the data source and click on migrate. Now it'll ask you whether you want to migrate it without export or with export. Now if you migrate it without export, you will not be able to revert back the data source to a 3.x data source type at a later stage. But if you do migrate it with export, you can always migrate it back to a 3.x data source if something doesn't work out. But in our case, just to make it faster and simpler, we are going to use the without export option. So there you go. Once it's migrated, the white dot beside it is gone. Now once you have your data source, the general urge would be to go go to your info providers and start creating transformations between objects. But it's always a good idea to first get your data, at least a sample of your data, into this BW system, to have a look at it, to whether what kind of data it is, and look at the data types, whether it's proper or not. You'll get to know what kind of data you can expect at a later stage, so you can actually plan your transformations and your info providers. So I'm going to just go ahead and create an info package for the initial upload first, so that I have some data in my PSA before I start modeling the other objects. So I'm just going to name it initialization. I hope I'm right with the spelling. Just click on save. Now you can see that it has given multiple selections. Now, since this being the initial load, you would want to be very careful not to load too much data. And I've already checked the system, and since it's an IDS system, there is some sample data available here. So I'm going to go ahead and select or filter the company code 2000, which is basically UK company code, which will load your IFRS ledgers. So there you go. I do not want to filter out anything else, because the data should be around 100,000, 100 to 150,000, which should be which can be easily handled. So let me just go ahead with the extraction. The data format is going to be fixed length only. It's going to show you only PSA because you have not modeled the data flow as yet, which is fine. Then go ahead and go to update. Now you want to leave that as a full update, because you will use you would want to use this data at a later stage to upload into the DSO and into the InfoCube finally. And let's go ahead and schedule this data load immediately. There you go, data was requested. Let's just right click on the data source and select manage, and click on the traffic light to see the monitor. They're already complete. Great. So we have 5 data packages coming in, and about 80,000, about 100,000 records coming in. So the data load was successful for 0FIGL_10 till the PSA. So we have some data right now. Let's just go ahead and have a look at what kind of data we have, so that we get a good understanding of what to expect when we are actually modeling our flows. There you go. You have your fiscal year, you have your transaction grouping, you have your currency, you have your ledger, the version, the account number, which is a GL account, the company code 2000, the only company code that we loaded data for, the controlling area, and the value type, the currency type, the fiscal year period, I guess, yeah, it is. The fiscal year variant, the chart of accounts, INT stands for international in case of IDS systems. Then you have your transactional currency, you have your accumulated amounts, total debits, total credits. Great. So you have good looking data. Let's just go ahead and build the rest of the flow, so that we can look at it inside the cube. I'm going to go ahead and go to InfoProviders. So if you remember the data flow again, you would have seen that we have loaded the data from the data source to the 0FIGL O10 in ODS object, or the DSO, data store object. And the reason for that is, again, as we discussed, the data source 0FI_GL_10 only supports after image deltas. So you might want to use a DSO in between in order to if you want to capture the deltas at a later stage. But since we are doing the initial load right now, it's not really it doesn't really make any difference, but in any case we are going to build the data flow properly, because we would want our deltas to come in right. So right click on the DSO and say create transformation. Select the object type as a data source and key in the name of the data source, the transaction, the source system that the data source belongs to, which is nothing but your ECC client 800 in my case, which is the IDS system. Okay, there you go. Now the most important part here would be to map the fields appropriately, and since we have already had a look at the data, it'll be much easier than doing it blindly. So the fiscal year should go into, yeah, that's not fiscal year, let's just skip that for now. Account number obviously goes to the GL account, then there is company code, there it is, there is version. I'm just going to go ahead and map these myself and resume the video once I'm done. So I'm going to pause the video for now. There you go. I've finished mapping all the standard fields from the data source to the DSO info objects, or the DSO key and data fields. Now one important point to remember here is that in the rule group you have just mapped the standard groups, also map the technical group, which is nothing but the update mode mapped to the zero record mode info object, which will actually support your delta process. Now once you are done mapping all the rule groups, you can go ahead and activate the transformation. Record mode. Let's go ahead and look at it again. Sorry about that. It was actually mapped to constant. I might want to give it a direct assignment instead and then activate it again. There you go. So your transformation is now active. Let's go back and have a look at it. There you go. So you can go ahead and create a DTP and load your data from BSA into the data store object. Extraction, you can set this to just a smaller number just to make sure that it supports. You can make it a full load for this time, and just if you remember, we didn't load any master data for this, just for the sake of simplicity and keep the video size smaller and video time lesser. But so we are going to go ahead and allow further processing without the master data, because we don't have any master data loaded as yet. Go to execute, and before you can execute you have to activate the DTP. Once it's activated, go ahead and execute it. Yes. Let's go ahead and see if it loads properly into the DSO. Wonderful. Everything's turned to green, which is always a good sight. Let's go ahead and look at the data inside the DSO. Right click on manage on the DSO. Select the request, go to the contents and check the new data table for your records. Now please remember that we have not activated the data inside the DSO, so it's going to be available only in the new data table for now. So looks like everything came in fine. Okay, so let's just go back. if you do want to have a look at it, you can see that none of the data is actually loaded into your active data or changelog table. The reason being we have not activated into the DSO yet. So we'll go ahead and do that. Select on the request and click activate. Select the request again, click start. There you go. It has created an activation job in the background. Just go ahead and click on jobs to have a look at it. Click on execute in the job selection screen. There you go, that's our job. Just keep refreshing it. We'll go ahead and pause the video here. As you can see, our activation background job has finished, and let's just go back and have a look at the active data. There you go, it's disappeared from the activation screen. Let's come out of it and do a refresh here. Should show you a reporting symbol against the request, confirming that the data is now active. So if you go back and look into the new data table, you'll find no records, because the records would have moved to your active data and changelog tables. Wonderful. Go back and see if your changelog is filled as well. There you go. Wonderful. Now that you have data into your DSO, the next step would obviously be to load the data into the final target of our extraction today, which is the cube. So in order to do that, right click on the cube and say create transformation. Select the data store object and give it the name of the data store object. Luckily we have it on top here. Say yes, and let me just expand that for you. There you go, everything is mapped perfectly. Since we have used the same objects, just have a look at it for a moment. Now please note that these mappings might not be perfect as per business, but this is just a demonstration of the technical stuff, so don't worry too much about it. You can see that the currency is mapped to the debit, credit and balance, which is good. You should also see the transaction currency. Now the standard cube obviously does not support the standard currency, I guess, so we're just gonna have to do with the actual currency, that is the currency in the local currency amount, locally currency amount, or your predefined currency for your GL account, sorry, the company code. Yes, go ahead and activate the transformation. That is fine. Okay, just go back, and once we have our transformation created, we would also have the relevant TTP for that. So just go ahead and create the data transfer process. Object would be the data store object, and the name is, sorry, let me just do that again. Okay, create data transfer process, data store object. The name is 0FIG_O10. Say yes. Get the extraction. You want to capture data from the changelog. You could select a full in case for now, but you can later change it to delta mode. Right now, let's just go ahead and hit the full update. Okay. So activate the TTP. And go ahead and execute it. there you have it. The request is green again. Always nice to look at. Right click on the cube, click on manage, select the request, and just have a look at the number of transferred and added records from the DSO. It's a full update. Okay, looks good to me. Let's just have a look at the data. Right click and click on display data. Select the characteristics and execute. Let's just use DB aggregation. Just have a look at 100 samples records. There you go. Company code, controlling area, functional area, profit center, segment, chart of accounts, GL account, currency type, request ID, the balance, the currency, the fiscal year variant, the fiscal year period. Okay, everything looks great. So that ends our demonstration for the extraction part. I'm going to do a third part in which we'll have a report created over the InfoCube and have a look at it from a reporting perspective as well. Thank you very much.